What's going on, guys? The Strong Boys 19 here, and yeah, you may hear it or you may not, but the fireworks are going off. It is November right now, but this is another episode for Classic Albums Revisited, and since I'm going to be doing this review, sadly with my webcam because of almost empty free space on my phone, I'm going to be reviewing an album that will turn 27 years old, and by the time you're watching this, the album is 27 years old. So I'm going to be reviewing the 1991 album from Irish shoegaze dream pop legends My Bloody Valentine, entitled Loveless. So Loveless is their second full-length album via Creation Records, and this is the follow-up to their first album entitled Isn't Anything, released in 1988. So before Loveless came out, the band released two EPs, the Glider EP and the Tremolo EP, and some of those tracks were added along with the rest of the original tracks as the final finished product that would become Loveless. This album is 48 and a half minutes long. It has 11 tracks. And the reason why I love this album so much, it is because not only that it is known as a classic and by many people as one of the best albums of all time, which I agree highly on two of those things. Loveless to me is one of those albums that really takes me into a very open world environment from its in-depth, intense, but yet unique artistry. And that's why I love this album so much. So around this period, My Bloody Valentine had been going through some troubles because the album took 2 years to make. Both Kevin Shields, the mastermind behind the music, and the founder and guitar player and songwriter in the band, along with Belinda Butcher, the second guitarist, lyricist, and vocalist in the band, had been suffering from tinnitus due to the amount of very high, extreme loud volumes, whilst trying to achieve the sound that both of them had wanted to produce the songwriting on this album. And the album is one of the most expensive to produce. £250,000 had been totaled after the whole thing was completed, and it put Creation Records near bankruptcy. But in all fairness, what we've got on Loveless is simply a masterpiece of, I think, some of the most interesting, experiencing albums. And when I said experiencing, Kevin Shields did want to make music so that the audience, wherever they go live, to experience it. And I can understand that really highly. And I think Kevin Shields is one of the best musicians of all time, not only as a songwriter, but as one of the giants of sound. So the opening track and single, Only Shallow, begins with the 4 hits on the snare drum, but immediately after that, the band comes in, through the roof. It just hits you right in the face from its wall of sound. And the most distinct and prominent thing throughout this entire album is the guitar sound itself. It has been recorded in many different aspects. A lot of high volume, distortion, fuzz, feedback, and effects like delay and reverbs have been happening a lot on these tracks. And Kevin Shields had never once stopped the process until he got the sound that he really wanted throughout this entire album. And that is quite a rare thing for some musicians to do that. Like the Beatles with Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's, and even Brian Wilson from his creative mind for Pet Sounds. So I think Kevin Shields is a very intelligent musician. The vocals are done mostly by Belinda Butcher, and her vocals were really, really sweet and soft on a lot of the tracks. And she was one of the writers for lyrics on this album, and Shields did write a few lyrics as well. And There are other tracks on this album that I really do love, including To Hear Knows When, but the recording process on that track took 1 entire week to just record the tambourine to keep everything on time, despite the overall loud and panning through the speakers, dizzying distortion from the guitar sound that's all over the place. When You Sleep is another one of my favourites on this album, and this is a song that both Butcher and Shields do vocals together, and the simplicity of the song is really strong. The musicianship throughout, I think, all these tracks were really, really spot on. I Only Said is another high favourite of mine. It is kind of a repetitive sounding song, but it really gets the mind going. Its beat is that good. You just want to hear it non-stop from start to the finish. And there's a lot of sweet melodies like Only Shallow and When You Sleep and I Only Said. But there are other ones like Blown a Wish to another great track, What You Want. Sometimes is where Kevin Shields plays the acoustic guitar and his heavy, fuzzy guitar drones are laying in the background and his voice sounds quite moody. There were some songs lyrically that may sound moody, but when I listen to Loveless, I always just want to pay attention to the sound, because this is the sound that My Bloody Valentine achieved that brought their popularity up to the masses, and it became a very important sound at that. Soon, the last track on this album is my personal favourite song, and it opens up with a catchy and looped dance beat, and it remains consistent as well all the way through to the end. And what is so good about this one is not only the aggressive guitar sound, but its delivery is that tight. The pieces just glue together. And again, Shields and Butcher do vocals together, and they just work so well. What really makes this album more interesting is that Kevin did write the material in many different tunings, and also he uses the tremolo a lot on his guitar to get that signature sound. Colm and Debbie, the rest of the members of the band, worked really well. Even the samples made the sound of this album from its ambience. And that's another thing that rarely gets talked about. The samples that were included on some of these tracks as the last touches, I think it really makes the whole environment of this album sound more interesting. So overall, I think Loveless is seriously one of the must-have albums in anyone's collection, and it'll always be one of my all-time favorite albums for all eternity. And let me know what you think of Loveless down in the comments below, and also tell me if you have heard of My Bloody Valentine. I would like to know what your thoughts are when you first experienced this band, because at that time, My Bloody Valentine are not one of the easiest of listening bands, because they were having a sound that nobody had ever done before. So I absolutely do love this album. It still remains as one of my 100 all-time favourites ever, and it'll stay that way. That's really all I got to say on My Bloody Valentine's seminal magnum opus, Loveless. Thank you guys for watching, and I will keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.